have our recorder on? Do we need to hit the pull button on the recording?
Oh, sure.
Are we recording, or do we need to hit the button on here? We are now. Okay, good evening, everybody. Today is Wednesday, August 12th, 2020, and a quorum present. I will call the Finance Committee to order for this evening. We'll note that Alder Ryan is joining us via WebEx, and so we do have full attendance today. The first item on our agenda is to approve the previous meeting's minutes from 7/28 of 2020, copies of which were in the meeting packets. Does anybody need corrections or revisions made to those minutes? If not, is there a motion to approve the minutes? Motion by Herbst, is there a second? Second by Martins. And because we have one Alder on WebEx, we will roll call vote our issues tonight just to make sure that we have everyone recorded. Martins?
Aye.
Ryan? Watson? Herbst?
Aye.
And I'll vote aye as well. Minutes are approved. Item number 2 is discussion and possible action regarding sole source purchase for a Daikin McQuay rooftop chiller for City Hall for $73,000. You'll see the information in your meeting packets that they've gotten pricing from a couple of sources. However, the installation brackets that the unit has to sit on would have to be reconfigured and redesigned to accommodate a different unit. So Brian Barkoyak is requesting that we replace the existing unit with the same unit to minimize our installation costs. Does anyone have questions on that purchase or on that item at all? Ms. Ryan, go ahead.
I was just wondering, is there any type of rebate from Focus on Energy for replacing the equipment?
Eric Lindman is coming up. Deb, hold on a second. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. I do not know, Deb, but the manufacturer, once we do purchase it, that will go through the Focus on Energy and determine if there's any rebates for us.
Okay, I just thought to inquire. I know they do it on a residential basis.
Right, no,
All right,
great
thank you.
question. Yep.
Thanks. Do we have further questions? If not, is there a motion to approve the purchase? Motion by Herbst, second by Watson. Roll call vote. Martins?
Aye.
Ryan?
Aye.
Watson? And Herbst?
Aye.
I'll vote aye as well. That item is approved. Item number 3 is discussion and possible action regarding a rent adjustment to Wausau Flying Service due to the COVID-19 Safer at Home order. We do have Airport Manager John Shamil with us this evening. If you have questions for him, you have documentation in the packets that indicate that during the Safe at Home order, flight activity at the airport was dramatically reduced, and so he's seeking some relief on rent and fuel flow payments during that period of time. It looks like the total is approximately $4,400. Does anyone have questions for the airport manager on that item at all? If not, is there a motion to approve that assistance? Motion by Martin, second by Ryan. Further questions or discussion? Seeing none, then we'll go ahead and vote. Watson? Herbst?
Aye.
Martins?
Aye.
Ryan?
Aye.
And I'll vote aye as well. That item is also approved. All right. Thank you, John, for coming down. You bet. Item number 4 is a public hearing on the 2020 Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistance Grant. And you'll recall every year we are eligible for this grant, and we go through the process of applying for it and then allocating and accepting those funds. So with this item being a public hearing, I will call for anyone in attendance tonight, either online or in person, who wishes to make comment with regard to the 2020 Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistance Grant. Do we have anyone with us who wishes to make comment on that item? We'll ask for the third time. Anyone here or online wish to make comment or ask questions about the 2020 Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistance Grant that would be applied for through the police department? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing on that item. And that brings us to item number 5, which is discussion and possible action regarding a resolution to approve an agreement between the City of Wausau and Marathon County for the JAG grant for the 2020 Byrne Justice Assistance Grant Program Award, should it be awarded to us. And there's some documentation also in your packets outlining the partnership between the Sheriff's Department and the Police Department for the tools that they would acquire with the grant. We have Deputy Chief Barnes with us in the audience if you have questions for him. If not, is there a motion then to approve the grant application? Motion by Ryan, is there a second? Second by Herbst. And we'll go ahead and vote then. Herbst?
Aye.
Watson? Ryan?
Aye.
Martins? I'll vote aye as well, and that item is approved. Item number 6 is discussion and possible action regarding a budget modification for the Great Lakes Cheese Demolition Project for $12,000 due to extra soil removal and silt fencing to meet DNR remediation requirements. Does anybody have questions on that item for Director Lindman? Ms. Ryan, go ahead.
I guess it's kind of similar question I've had in past meeting. It just seems that when you're moving a budget item, such as from I believe this was from professional services to land, it just seems that some people can interpret, okay, well then I should charge it to professional services. And that's not the right category. The right category is to have it into land. But is there somehow that there was not enough budget put there, or can we be looking at the Holtz-Krause as an option instead of professional service, or does Holtz-Krause not have a budget?
Go ahead, Marianne.
Well, I think this wasn't all remediation, I guess, and we are trying to, I guess, save the funds that are in the Holtz-Krause for, big remediation projects, including, the ongoing maintenance that we have at Holtz-Krause, because once those funds are depleted, then we're going to have to go annually to the tax levy to fund those ongoing maintenance costs at Holtz-Krause. So we really want to be selective, and when we analyzed where funds were available, we thought it was better to use the professional services line item.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, does anybody else have questions? If not, then, is there a motion to approve the line item move of the $12,000 to fund those requirements? Motion by Martins, is there a second? Second by Herbst. We'll go ahead and vote then. Martins? Ryan?
Aye.
Herbst?
Aye.
Watson? I'll vote aye as well, and that item is approved. Item number 7 is discussion and possible action regarding a budget modification to allocate $110,000 from parks, swimming pool operating budgets to the playground replacement program. And you'll recall earlier this summer when we made the painful decision to not open our public pools, we talked about the fact that our operational savings from not using the pools would be about $110,000. And one thing we talked about here in this committee was to look and see if we could take the savings that we gained from that and do something else that the community could really use and appreciate that would mean a lot to our city. And so we thought maybe a new playground or a playground upgrade to a park that really needs one would be something that residents could use and appreciate for a long, long time. And so even though they didn't get to swim this year, we were able to take that revenue and do something else for them. And so the Park and Rec Committee delved into some options, and you have their recommendations before you for a playground upgrade. I believe that one is at 3M Park at the end of 3rd Avenue. And let me just take a look here. And does anybody have questions regarding that project or repurposing those funds? Ms. Ryan, go ahead.
I did have some discussion via email about that. The Whirly Park was asking questions and had felt that they should be considered as well at the time. And it happens we're talking about in a similar area. I don't know exactly, and I believe Jamie had not met with Worley Park residents yet. I'm not sure, but Worley Park residents had felt they were hoping not to have to wait another few years in order to get upgrades to their park. And it's smaller with the smokestack, but it seems to be in a well-used area. And so I just wanted to mention that.
Okay, that was for their tot lot, right?
Yes,
For their, okay. And I think if memory serves, that tot lot is a little older, or is not as old yet as the park that they were focusing on. Is that correct?
Correct. Hey, Chair Rasmussen, this is Jamie. I'm on the line.
Hi, Jamie.
hi Jamie.
Hi, I can speak to that. Yes, Worley Park's not quite as old as 3M Park, so on our replacement schedule, it is also a more of a tot lot instead of a larger community park. So 3M, in the discussion from the committee, 3M seemed to work in the timeline, and it serves a pretty big area with the use of that park with the ball diamonds and everything there as well. And we have an opportunity to make that park, we just were out there and saw that it has like two different areas. We can make it one larger area and make it a much different and better use park playground.
Okay, and that park does also seem to have some level of year-round use as well. I think there's a lot of sledding that happens over there as well. So that's something that, I think a lot of people would take part in. And, it's also serving a neighborhood that waited a long time for attention as well. So does anyone else have questions for Jamie or have comments? Go ahead, Dawn.
I just want to comment, I had the opportunity, or I should say, I took the opportunity to go to Oak Park this weekend, and I'm telling you, the playground equipment, you can see it for quite some time away. It's beautiful, it's colorful, and it really is a nice addition to to Oak Island down there.
They're beautiful, aren't they?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I was out to Brockmeyer Park the other night, and JoJo's Jungle was super busy, and there was lots of kids having a good time out there. So good to see. With that, is there a motion then to approve the shift in funds to assign this $110,000 as recommended by the Park and Rec Committee? Motion by Watson, second by Herbst. Okay, and we'll go ahead and vote then. Ryan?
Aye.
Martins? Watson? Herbst?
Aye.
I'll vote aye as well, and that is approved. Item number 8 is discussion and possible action regarding a budget modification for local share funding of an Assistance to Firefighters grant for automated CPR devices. And this is actually happy news. Our fire department has applied for and been awarded a grant to replace their automatic CPR devices that do chest compressions, and they have about an 8-year lifespan. We were actually considering a request in our 2021 CIP process to budget for those next year for replacement, and with the receipt of this grant, we won't have to. So they're looking for us to just fulfill the local share and accept the grant, and then we can get a little more out of our dollars for CIP without having to plan for that item. Does anyone have questions for Chief Kuchawa on that item at all? Go ahead, Sarah.
I guess I just have a question about, is there anything in the packet about it?
No. Tracy and I realized that this afternoon, we were going to circle back on it. It came kind of at the last minute. It's a small transfer. It's $4,800 because it's just the local share, which is 10% of the entire project. So, in looking at some funding mechanisms, they did have 3 firefighter vacancies for part of the year. So I guess that would be my recommendation, is that we fund it out of the savings.
Out of salary savings?
Right, for that time period where the vacancies occurred.
Okay. All right. Deb, go ahead.
I was just going to mention that for grants, quite often, it's normally a 50-50 or with larger foundations. So this grant coming in at 90% funded and only a 10% match is a great bargain for the city. So
Yep.
I hope we approve it.
It's awesome, isn't it?
Yes.
Do we have a motion to approve the grant process and accept the grant? Motion by Ryan, is there a second? Second by Herbst. I will go ahead and vote then. Watson? Herbst?
Aye.
Ryan?
Aye.
Martins? I'll vote aye as well. and that item is then approved. Item number 9 is discussion and possible action on a statement for purposes for ADA Title II compliance. This comes to us from our friends at Public Access Television. Every year, we're required to review our processes for how we manage our ADA Title II compliance. And so you've got some documentation in the packets there outlining their plan. That plan is, for now, unchanged from last year. If members have questions, though, we can bring up Dave from Public Access, and he will answer any questions that you have about the plan or how they got to it. Deb Ryan, go ahead. Dave, if you could come up for a second, and we'll bring
I
Dave
have
from
talked
behind the
to-
camera to up to the microphone. So,
I have talked to Dave about this in the past, and that with what is replayed on YouTube, I think Dave had said it was over 90% accurate. So I do feel like on a past tense basis of watching it after the meeting, and I have watched a number of them, that is helpful to have.
definitely. Any questions that we have specifically for Dave about the operation or about how they're getting it done today? Okay,
No.
all right, I think we're set then. Do we have a motion then to approve the compliance plan? Motion by Herbst, second by Ryan. We'll go ahead and vote. Martins? Ryan?
Aye.
Herbst? Watson? I'll vote aye as well, and that plan is then approved. Item number 10 is discussion and possible action on a contract for residential inspection services with the town of Rib Mountain. You've got a memo in your packets from Bill Hebert about that, and we have him with us tonight if there's some questions. We have helped out in the past some other municipalities with inspections when they had people that were out on leave and needed some assistance, and we do that on a fee basis. If you want to come up, Bill, and just walk us through, since you have both items, 10 and 11.
Good evening, thank you.
Sure.
The first contract for residential inspection services, Rib Mountain has only one inspector. He's been there about 5 years. Hasn't taken a week's vacation yet, so his director thought it would be time for him to take a break. So they approached us about filling in on an as-needed basis. This would be, they only budgeted for about 30 hours worth of our work. So it'd be like 1 or 2 weeks a year, probably a Tuesday, Thursday deal where people would, they'd consolidate the inspections. We'd run over to Rib Mountain and do them.
Sure. Okay. And we've done that type of service before in Weston or Schofield, haven't we, when they had someone out?
Correct.
Yeah. Anyone else have questions for Bill on that? It's also a great way to build a relationship with our neighboring communities. I think that whenever we can share services and work together, that helps everybody. So do we have a motion then to approve the contract for residential inspection with Rib Mountain? A motion by Watson, is there a second? Second by Martins. We'll go ahead and vote then. Martins? Ryan?
Aye.
Watson? Herbst? I'll vote aye as well. And the next item is right with that. It's discussion and possible action on a contract for commercial inspection services with the town of Rib Mountain. And kind of the same drill there. Anything to add, Bill, with that, or?
Well, so we started the conversation about residential. I said, what about commercial? For the most part, Rib Mountain's their main commercial area is Rib Mountain Drive, which is just across the bridge for us. And many times we get calls on the commercial projects anyways, because we share the same zip code. So I suggested we enter an agreement similar to what we do for Schofield and provide those commercial inspection services. In reviewing the last 5 years permits for Rib Mountain, they've really averaged about 10 commercial permits. So the workload wouldn't be incredibly high, but
Sure.
it would be a good way to work with that community. And we're working with the same contractors anyways, so, we have a relationship.
Perfect. Anybody have questions for Bill? Go ahead, Dawn.
Bill, I really don't have a question. I guess my comment would be, how long does it take when you go in and do a commercial inspection, or what is involved in that?
It really depends on the job, if it's, NTC is gonna put up a storage building, 6,000 square feet, we can be in and out of there in 30 to 40 minutes. River Life is a 4-story apartment building. It's going to take a little bit longer for us to get through, but we all have our point-in-time inspections. We're there at a footing inspection or a rough inspection, and this one will be a final, obviously, but,
Okay.
so we're pretty familiar with the building, but in general, staff can plan for if it's going to be a 45-minute, hour and a half inspection or more.
Okay. Thank you, appreciate that.
Okay. Do we have a motion then to approve the commercial inspection services contract between Wausau and Red Mountain? Motion by Ryan, is there a second? Second by Martins. We'll go ahead and vote then. Martins? Ryan?
Aye.
Watson? Herbst?
Aye.
I'll vote aye as well, and that is also approved. Thanks, Bill. Item number 12 is discussion and possible action authorizing an engagement of additional services with ACT Services and a related budget modification. And who has this item? Does Mary Ann have this one?
Nope.
Let me just take a look here. Oh, this one came to us from the legal office, I believe. Here we go. And we've got the write-up in our packets about that as well. Does anyone have questions for the city attorney about this particular item? I've got to toggle between the packet and the agenda. Here we go. Okay, and so ACT Services would conduct the ADA audit. And we've got a budget modification then to fund that process. No questions? Is there a motion?
I got it.
Oh, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, this one, I've been trying to follow the timeline on this, and it's
Okay.
got me just, I don't know if it's the volume of information here, or if it's the whole thing. It just got me a little bit confused. So we had a contract for 18,000 and change. And I remember we approved that last summer. And then there was another, we optioned, and then what is it, Public Works optioned another $900 and then, but then there's another $899, so that's the $1,790 that they want to modify, correct? We want to
Correct. We'll
modify?
bring up the city attorney and she'll
Yeah.
walk us through. Thank you, Ann.
You're exactly right.
Okay.
Mike, the 3 invoices they sent to us were over the approved amount by $899.99. And then after the end of the project, there were some additional services that they offered to us, and those of us who are members of the Board of Public Works looked at those and liked one of the additional services, which I think was right around $900. So
$900.
yes, it's the total of those two. We want to purchase additional services, but we can't pay the third and final invoice because it's beyond the amount that was approved.
Okay.
By the $899.99. So by approving the $1,700, you're approving his final payment on the work that's already complete and allowing us to do a little more follow-up,
Did they
in essence.
give any reason why it was over, $899 over, or was it just the way it came, or?
Do you remember, Eric, or can you add anything to that?
Yeah, when we initially contracted with them, the report was, we thought that the report that we had asked for was going to be adequate. They had provided us some additional work or some additional reporting that they could show us, and we also felt that that would be advantageous. And so we made that selection so we could get that additional information, for the long term within the report and gather that information, but we just hadn't brought that.
That's the additional
cost.
services,
That's
but do we know why they were $900 over the amount?
Or $899.90 or
Nope,
whatever?
I
yeah.
thought that's why it
No.
was, because the additional report information, yeah. And then now I think they want to do additional work for us, so,
Okay.
yeah, with the additional $900,
Okay.
okay?
Okay. All right. Additional questions or follow-up? If not, is there a motion then to approve the engagement of ACT Services for the $1,799.99?
So moved.
Motion by Martins, is there a second? Second by Herbst. We'll go ahead and vote. Watson? Herbst? Martins? Ryan?
Aye.
I'll vote aye as well, and that item is also approved. And that brings us to our last item on the agenda, which is discussion and possible action on issuing a request for proposals for towing services. We'll switch there, and we've got a memo in the packets about that as well. And that also has come down from the legal office. The city of Wausau has never had a formal towing contract with any tow company. So, if they need to remove a vehicle for whatever purpose, we've not had a dedicated contract provider do that. I think they've usually always worked off of a call list, and the next one up got the work. You've got some documentation in the packets about, how that process would work if they entered into a contract for towing vehicles, including tows that are requested by our departments, when vehicles are, either abandoned, parked incorrectly, whether they're evidence. Also talks about, storage fees if they need to store a vehicle temporarily. Does anybody have any questions on that subject, either for the PD or for, and here we have Nate Miller coming up. So we'll get some advice from the attorney's office. And Deb Ryan, you have a question? You can go ahead first.
Yes, I feel like I'm a somewhat of a quite heavy user, I've only bought one new car in my life back in '79, so I really believe in used cars and having AAA and using their tolls normally and keeping under it. So from my experience over the years, having been in Wausau since '98, especially in the last few years, even with AAA, there are times when they cannot find anybody because of an accident on the expressway, where I've been told that someone from Clark County would be coming in like 2 hours. So I just don't know if we really have the capacity to really have that. And especially for my car, it's an all-wheel drive. Just throwing the winds on it, it doesn't do it. My car, all-wheel drive, has to be put in neutral and be put on, the full car has to be pulled onto the truck bed. So otherwise, you're gonna damage the tranny on that because it's all-wheel drive. So I'm concerned that we may not have that capacity around the city. And that it's been a number of times in the last few years where there's been major delays, and even with AAA, you would think they would have high priority, and I just don't know if we have that capacity yet at this point. Thank you.
It'll be interesting through the RFP process to see what responses they get and what the pricing looks like. I'm certainly interested to see. This is something we haven't explored before, but it is something we've talked about before, and I think at one point there were even tow companies that were interested in being that provider, but without a public-facing process and some vetting, you can't do it that way. So an RFP certainly makes sense. So welcome, Nate, if you want to talk us through this a little bit.
Yeah, so this is obviously a little different RFP because, we're not technically, for certain types of tows, we will be paying them. But obviously for the non-consensual, no preference tows, that will then be taken care of the owner of the vehicle. We're basically doing this RFP to get kind of a standard price of what the person can expect to then be paying. That's kind of also kind of what Deb was saying, that, yeah, sometimes it's going to be a really long wait. That's kind of why we were going to have a backup. Obviously, we live in Wisconsin. We know that this happens. But actually today, I think we have David here from Jerry's Towing, that he kind of wants to talk a little bit about what he sees that this should probably look like. We did not want to talk to him before this because we didn't want to look like we were trying to write an RFP for his company.
Correct.
Because obviously we're going to be sending it out to everybody within, or all the tow companies within Wausau, to see what they can offer. But I'm going to let David kind of talk here.
Yep,
'Cause,
that will help because then we can get their perspective as a vendor. So,
yeah, I am not a tower.
okay, come on up. Welcome.
Welcome, thank you very much. My name is David Wilkins, I'm the actually owner of Jerry's Towing, and we also have a large holding company called the Midwest Star Group. So we are a 60-year-old family towing company that was originated in River Falls, And from a side note, I want to say thank you. My dad was the mayor, the city council member, the EDC board, so I appreciate the time you guys are putting into this relationship, because I know the amount of hours and the work that it takes to go into this, so thank you for letting us come and talk to you. My number one concern, when I reached out to the attorney's office, or we had some dialogue, was just, there's a local sector of towing expectation, there's a national standard, and I think, we've worked very hard over the 60 years to set that bar of service based on accountability and the liability with our working partnerships with the cities. So we do cover 13 counties. I think we're arguably the largest provider in the state. We have about 100 pieces of equipment, in which we moved to Wausau 3 years ago. For the purpose of our national customers and our local customers, we were coming out of either the Eau Claire markets. We just couldn't service the market promptly. So we made the decision to invest into this community. So having being said that, 3 years later, we look at this as an opportunity and a partnership, but we're also concerned that this process doesn't happen too quickly, because quite honestly, we don't have any true contracts with any of our police departments or cities. They're operating agreements, and they're based on the level of service given and the consistency of service given. And nobody's in the race to the bottom on pricing, because low price gets you what Deb was saying, it gets you no service. And AAA is that example. We were a AAA vendor for 35 years. We're no longer a AAA vendor, and there's no longer AAA vendors hardly available anywhere in the state, because they don't pay enough for the high-risk insurance, the cost of equipment, and all that. So the bid process makes me a little bit nervous of what you'll get in the end as a vendor in service, what the responsibility and the accountability will be to the city. So I just wanted to bring that to the attention of the folks on the committees, that I don't want to see us put ourselves into a box where we can't be part of that partnership, and I don't want to see us miss out on an opportunity because we didn't give you enough information of a national standard, that you don't have to go and recreate the wheel. I've got tons of information I could share with the attorney's office, which obviously I know prior to this meeting would be looked at differently in favoritism. So they said, please come here and have your opinion heard. And that's what I want to just get that dialogue started tonight, is before they would put a bid out, when Nate gave me just the verbiage of it, it was very, very vague, to the point that the liability would still fall back on the city when you have the wrong vendors, no certification for the operators, background checks, drug testing. There's a ton of litigation out there that'll show you that the cities in different parts of the nation have done these bids. They didn't have the proper due diligence and the vetting, and a sexual offender worked for the towing company and, unfortunately murdered the young girl, and the city wrote out a $10 million check. So there's a lot of that's been done, due diligence before today, that we could at least have the city look at, that they understand the parameters and the level of service should be at a higher expectation than AAA, if you will.
Sure. Well, and the good part about an RFP process is that when the proposals come back in and the Board of Public Works opens them, there'd certainly be a ranking and scoring process, and, they then have the option to ask additional questions of those respondents. They also have the option to bring firms in and interview them, and talk about the parameters of the service and figure out what sets one company ahead from the others. So they wouldn't just be looking at them two-dimensionally on paper and trying to make a decision. If it was obvious that that couldn't happen, and they needed more information, they could certainly get it. So, I think that an RFP process, based on the number of tow vendors there are, and the market share that they all have, it's certainly a fair process to let everybody compete for that business.
Absolutely.
And then see what shakes out. And it's a good public-facing process, because then, when the Board of Public Works gets those bids open, they can go through that ranking process and then make a recommendation to us based on that level of service. And then they'll certainly engage in the selection with our departments that are using tow services and summoning them, because they all have different needs. If you have to remove a vehicle for a snow emergency, that's a whole lot different than if you have to remove one from an accident that's blocking traffic. So, certainly we'll consider all those things, but definitely your point's well taken.
And so this particular stage then is to recognize the need, but it doesn't set the standard. I obviously didn't see anything in your packet, but there's no set standard at this point that would be something written in stone for the criteria for the vendors, correct?
Correct. And so what's being asked of the Finance Committee, if I understand correct tonight, is do we want to go to RFP for a towing contract? And if we do, we need to then bless that process and send it forward. So the parameters, with which the RFP goes out under certainly are subject to change. I mean, those can be updated by our staff as they're seeking to release that proposal and, get that key criteria in there. So.
Okay. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Sarah.
So what are the fundamental differences, just in a nutshell, between like the national standards and then the standards that you guys have in this area?
Well, traditionally what we see, and ironically we saw it on the way over here, that, and we are from that cut of that cloth. My parents started our business in '62 and my dad was 21 years old. The folks in the towing industry are the same generations of the farmers still. I mean, they're family-owned and operated companies. And unfortunately, like if you think of the garbage industry, 15, 20 years ago, you know your garbage man and you knew Johnson Sanitation, and today there is no more Johnson Sanitations per se. The cost of equipment and the liability insurance and the standard of operating that business safely and efficiently has taken the majority of the folks out of that game on a financial perspective. If you don't have the national standards in place, they still are allowed to play in that arena. So our major operational agreements have national standards in them for set criteria of the equipment, the background checks, the drug testing, that type of vetting program that unfortunately will eliminate a lot of the smaller companies that don't have the resources or the capacity. And when you get to this level of play with the city of Wausau involved with, still, you don't get away from that liability. That's what our concern is, that there are going to be people that are going to be excluded based on they don't have the capacity or the standard of the towing industry's expectation today in 2020.
Sure. Well, and we'll certainly request that they carry the proper commercial liability, and if they're storing vehicles, that's a little different than if they're just towing. So, I think that, it's key to get the right criteria in there, but I think it makes sense to see what the market will bear, and maybe bring us in terms of a contract for response. Ms. Ryan, go ahead.
I was just going to mention too that in my time a few years in Madison, I ended up parking on Willie Street where I didn't know you had to be off the street by 4. So the city of Madison has got a good policy of how they do things, or having towing companies go ahead and just moving vehicles if they're on the wrong street and park them on a nearby street, and then you get the ticket and have to pay for the towing and that. But I'm concerned 20 minutes to 30 minutes is insufficient even for an RFP. I just, yesterday I was asked to go and meet someone up in north of Brokaw. And I'm on the near west side. It took me 15 minutes just to get to Evergreen Road from where I live. I think the standard for towing is probably at least an hour. And maybe Jerry can mention more about that, but I know for AAA, it's normally an hour or more that you may be waiting. And so I don't know if you're going to find too many people that can meet that time deadline. And then about the storage as well. Is it just a question of if it's a snow emergency or an accident, to get it moved to someplace out of the way versus actually having to have a lot so that all these vehicles can be stored?
Right. Well, and we've talked a little bit about having the ability to tow and then impound vehicles for snow emergencies and things in the SISM committee. And when we talked about that in the SISM committee as part of our overnight parking and, plowing troubles, Lieutenant Buckner on 2 different occasions was a little worried about us going down that path yet, because we don't own or lease any sort of impound yard, and we just don't have the capacity to take vehicles on that large of a scale. And so we backed off of that in SISM, but Deputy Chief Barnes is here also, and I think he has a comment, and then we've got a question from Sarah.
Sure, I would just strongly encourage the committee to pass this RFP process. This is years and years in the making. This is not to establish who will tow from regular car crashes. This is to establish who will tow on behalf of the city when we make a decision to tow a vehicle, whether it is an abandoned vehicle or it's a tow for evidentiary purposes where we need to take custody of that vehicle. We have had numerous tow companies in this area over the years, very frustrated at how those decisions are made. Within the towing industry, we have had allegations of incredibly cutthroat activities between the different tow companies, undercutting and showing up in front of other tow companies and trying to get there, and we deal with the frustrations associated with that. This RFP allows us to have exactly who we're going to call. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. We know the expectations of the police department are set as part of a contract. What cleanup will occur at the location of a crash, for example, that the glass is removed, that the debris is removed. We know that the insurances exist. We know that We want to know the cost of impounding because that cost is transferred to our citizens whose vehicles are towed. And
Right.
we want to make sure that we're looking out for the financial best interests of those citizens as well. So there has been a tremendous amount of work and partnership between the city attorney's office and the police department in establishing this RFP, and I would strongly encourage this committee to approve that.
Okay. Sarah, go ahead with your question.
I guess it's not a question so much as a statement. I mean, it doesn't cost anything to do the RFP,
No.
right? And we're just going to sort of check the temperature of the industry and the
Yep.
markets. And these are the guidelines that we're going to evaluate these based on, but, I mean, and if they've been collaborated with the police department and the industry, I mean, let's do this.
I think it makes sense to see what's out there. Mike, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. And I don't know if this question should be directed towards you, Deputy Chief, or to Nate, but one of the questions I had is in the formulation of the RFP, you say that only towing companies within the corporate limits of Wausau are eligible to submit a proposal. Is there a specific reason for that? Because I know there's tow companies in, Maine and Rib Mountain and Schofield, and why would we want to lock them out even though their proximity seems to be close enough for a reasonable response time?
Well, I think there's two reasons for that, and I'm sure Nate might be able to discuss that as well. But when we look for contracts, we, number one, know there are numerous towing companies that operate within the city of Wausau and do business in the city of Wausau. Historically speaking, their response times are much closer than the companies that are not within the city of Wausau. And we also recognize that there's value in doing business with people that pay property taxes in the city of Wausau when the customer is the city of Wausau. So that's my answer to that question. I don't know if Nate had anything else to say, but I mean, that's why we look forward to that.
Yeah, and that's also what some of the complaints we've heard from the towing companies as well, is that we're business owners, in the city of Wausau, and we should be able to get a piece of this pie if we get picked. So that's why I guess I drafted it that way.
Okay, yeah, and I can understand keeping the business local, but just wanted to make sure we had that out there, that, because there are towing companies in the area that would question that reason, so.
Sure. Okay. Any additional questions or comments? If not, do we have a motion then to approve the undertaking of an RFP for tow services? Motion by Herbst, second by Watson. We'll go ahead and vote then. Martins? Ryan?
Aye.
Watson? Herbst? And I'll vote aye as well. So that is passed, and that RFP will go out, and we'll see what kind of results we get back from the market. That is the last item on our agenda tonight, so with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion by Watson, second by Martins. And this one will go, members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? No one ever is. So we'll stand adjourned, and then Common Council will start then in this chamber at 6:30. And I think the WebEx log on for that meeting is the same as this one, so you can stay on.